Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjalimanatosmi laye sambodhayet chittam vikshiptam shamayet punaha sakashayam vijaniyat samapraptam na chalayet. Om. The fundamental concepts that are always contemplated in philosophy, no matter what school it is, are the following. So, number one, it has to talk about the individual. Number two, about the world. Number three, about creation and the creator. Number four, it must establish the interrelationships between them. And number five, what is liberation or salvation or moksha. And number six is the ethics and the code of conduct that is necessary to achieve liberation. So these are only the six ideas, or what is technically called as prameyas for any philosophical thought. In fact, these are the six concepts even for science. So these six prameyas are interesting, are the interest of Vedanta, of philosophy. So there are therefore the viewpoints and how all these work together, there are difference of opinions. And therefore what happens is each school of philosophy develops its own methodology. And one of the important aspects of developing any methodology of any discipline is they start off with the technical terms. So therefore it is necessary that the knowledge of these technical terms relating to each school of philosophy is acquired, because without that knowledge, then what happens, we may misinterpret the teaching of one philosophy and then misunderstand that philosophy when we use a technical term belonging to a different school of thought. So even Yoga Shastra also has got very distinct technical terms, and those technical terms must be borne in mind whenever we study this Shastra. Now let us see what this Yoga Shastra is doing. The individual, we will call the individual as Jiva. So what is this individual? Yoga Shastra borrows terminology from Sankhya. And in Sankhya Shastra and Yoga Shastra share the same terminology called Sanghata. Sanghata means it is a collection. It is an assembly. What is that assembly? This assembly is of various components. For example, there is the gross components and there is the subtle components. So for the world there is gross components, for the individual there is gross components, for the macrocosm gross components, microcosm gross components. And therefore these gross components, when they come together, sanghataha, then what happens? A manifestation takes place, an appearance takes place. So every philosophy is interested in one aspect of this manifestation. And that is where the philosophy focuses. Yoga Shastra's philosophy is on the psychological aspect of this Sanghata, and it is called as Chitta. So another two important technical terms introduced in Yoga Shastra is there is a consciousness principle behind the assembly of all these entities, and that assembly and the consciousness principle behind it also have to be given a name. So what Yoga Shastra does is, there is a consciousness principle behind this Sanghata of both the gross and the subtle aspects, and that Yoga Shastra calls it as Purusha. Another terminology used in Yoga Shastra is Drashta. So why two terms? Why not have only one term? There is reason for this. When the Yoga Shastra uses the word Purusha, it is referring to this consciousness principle as the indweller. When it is, that means without the need for the manifestation of the gross, the pure consciousness principle has to be discussed. Then you will see consistently Yoga Shastra uses the word Purusha. But the same Purusha, when it is trying to interact with the manifested gross and subtle Prapancha or the gross and subtle Jiva, then the same Purusha becomes the seer, the Drashta. So the choice of the words depends on the context. So in other words, Purusha is Drashta, the seer, when it involves the manifest, whether it is gross or subtle. Now, when we say that this Purusha is the seer or the Drashta, then there must be a scene, there must be a seeable thing, there must be a perceivable thing, and that seeable entity is called Drishyam or Drishya, seen. It is called as creation. So now we'll come to the concept of how the two, that is the pure consciousness principle called Purusha and Drashta, pure matter principle called Drishyam, how do they come together is of interest. So therefore for that there has to be some tools, and those tools are the sense of seeing, touching, etc. So there is Drishyam, which is Prapancha, there is Drashta, which is Purusha, and Yoga Shastra has to somehow bring them together. Then let us look at the next concept which is relevant to the philosophy, of any philosophy for that matter, is that of creation and the creator. So the creation we called as Prapancha, but the creator, very special term is used by Yoga Shastra, Ishvara, though the word Ishvara is shared across different philosophies. Specific definition is there for Ishvara in the Yoga Shastra. That we have seen in great detail. So the interrelationships, the quality of the interrelationship, who defines and how is it defined? It is defined by studying the nature of the Drashta, the seer, the nature of the Drishyam, the seen, and the nature of Ishvara, who is a special Purusha in the sense of Yoga Shastra. So the next concept of philosophical concept is liberation. So what is this liberation? As far as Yoga Shastra is concerned, Yoga Shastra's liberation is defined as Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam. It is where a state of aloneness, later on Drashtu Swarupe Avasthanam is again encapsulated in one word in Yoga Shastra with giving the name aloneness or Kaivalyam. So then we also have to develop the philosophy has to develop ethics and code of conduct. To reach this state of aloneness, by employing and adjusting the jiva to the machinations of the prapancha, using the chitta and whatever other means are required. And this is the subject matter of Ashtanga Yoga, which will be discussed soon in this chapter. And incidentally, the prayojana also has to be discussed by a Shastra. Hari, you have a question?
No, I didn't. I was just thinking about something you were saying.
Okay. So there are also many fringe benefits in this process of the study, and those fringe benefits are called as siddhis. So why this preamble? Because in our last class we concluded our study of drishya, or the scene. So in the context of this the structure of any philosophy, let us look at drishyam. This drishya consists of two kinds. One is the macrocosmic prapancha consisting of 5 elements, and another is the microcosmic jiva consisting of the 3 kinds of bodies. We can borrow this idea from Vedanta, Stula Sukshma Karana Shariras. Now both these prapancha, 5 elements, and microcosm, the jiva consisting of the 3 bodies, they manifest. So what exactly do we mean by manifestation? By what quality these manifest? So decide what quality manifested. The Shastras go to the fundamentals of the qualities, and therefore it goes to the fundamentals of the guna. So it becomes inevitable that Yoga Shastra has to borrow from Sankhya and introduce the Trigunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamo gunas. So the first question is that how do we say that macrocosm prapancha and the microcosm jiva manifest by which guna? They manifest because of sattva guna. Only when there is a predominance of sattva guna, manifestation can take place. What happens with that is a different issue, but that it can manifest is because of sattva guna. That it can disappear is because of tamo guna. That it can interact between themselves, prapancha with jiva and jiva with prapancha, is because of rajas. So the point that is made in our study so far of the drishyam is, it is because of rajas manifestation becomes perceptible. Sattva-guna manifests. Rajoguna is the one which makes perception possible, and therefore all these things together, that is drishya prapancha plus triguna, which is macrocosm, drishya jiva plus trigunas, which is microcosm, together Yoga Shastra calls it as Vishesha. So Vishesha, the word Vishesha is a special terminology for Yoga Shastra. The moment we say Vishesha, it is something that is manifested because of Sattva Guna, and which also has got perceptible form, either gross or subtle. So the next question is, how do these two aspects, that is the prapancha and the jiva, how do they interact? Because they are so distinctly different. You look at the world, the prapancha, there is Prithvi, Apaha, Tejo, Vayu, Akasha. The fundamental elements are there. Then here is the jiva, which has no similarity to these elements unless you investigate with much more depth. How do they interact? So the Yoga Shastra says through avishesha, vishesha is interacted through avishesha. So what is this avishesha? It is Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. In both the Prapancha and in the Jiva, these Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha are present, but the microcosmic Jiva has one extra avishesha. That extra avishesha is the one which causes the entire problem of the human being, which is asmita. So the Yoga Shastra homes in on the basic problem of why we are not able to achieve Chitta Vritti Nirodha. It is because of this asmita. So therefore, there are characteristics of the Trishya. Then, but all this that is there, Trishya, is inert. Including the Buddhi is also inert. So, how is it in any individual or the Prapancha collectively, how can they cause Sukha Dukkha? How can something that is inert cause Sukha Dukkha? If for a moment we accept that Sukha Dukkha somehow is intrinsic quality of Prapancha, then whatever we do, we cannot get rid of Sukha Dukkha. Because that is its Swabhava. That we can get rid of Sukha Dukkha says that in the Prapancha, which has got the 5 elements combined with the Trigunas, or the Jiva, which has got these 3 kinds of bodies combined with the Trigunas, there is no Sukha Dukkha in that. So from where this Sukha Dukkha come? We'll hold that thought for a minute. So we also saw another aspect introduced by Yoga Shastra. That is, here is Drishya, here is the Jiva, and then the Jiva's interest in the Prapancha has got 2 purposes. The one purpose is so that the Jiva can enjoy the conglomeration of the Prapancha, this Samyoga, by contact. Only when you contact the Prapancha, there is possibility of enjoyment or suffering for that matter. So that is why Yoga Shastra introduces a very interesting term called Bhoga. Bhoga is not limited to the definition of enjoyment. It is proper to translate it as experience. So once we translate Bhoga as experience, then it can be either a positive experience or a negative experience. And Prapancha is also used for the sake of liberation. That is what the previous sutra told us. Bhoga apavargartham drishyam. So with this drishya, whether the macrocosmic drishya of Prapancha with Trigunas or the microcosmic drishya, my body, 3 bodies with Trigunas, can be appropriated either for bondage or for liberation. Now, liberation also can be achieved in 2 different ways. One is where I am actually continuously in association with the world. But if that association is for Loka Sangraha, for the sake of good of the world, that is also liberating. Or I can do Vairagya by becoming alone. So both these alternatives have to be accommodated in the Shastra. And therefore, you see how Patanjali is building up the case for Ashtanga Yoga. Why should we have all these disciplines? So that with these disciplines, our bhoga of the world can create Loka Sangraha. Then it will be in tune with the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishad also. And it can also be used for Vairagya, which is also the subject matter of Vedanta. For both of them, Yoga Abhyasa can become a means. So the point to remember is, Drishya Prapancha is Prapancha plus Jiva plus Trigunas plus the subtle Tanmatras, and the purpose is for the sake of Bhoga, Apavarga, of whom? Of the Drashta, of the seer. So we have got another problem then is the Drashta that is one who has got bondage. How can pure consciousness be in any bondage? That problem has got to be resolved, and let us see how Yoga Shastra dissolves it. He has already introduced that this Drishya Prapancha, there is one entity, a Purusha Vishesha, a very special Purusha is there, who is also a Drashta, who is a seer. Please note that this is a dualistic philosophy. So there is a Drashta, a dualistic seer, and we called in this Shastra as Ishvara. And this Ishvara is a Drashta. And we already saw Drashta and Purusha are synonymous. So he is a Purusha, but he is a special Purusha, Purusha Vishesha. The reason why he is a Purusha Vishesha is he does not have Klesha. So that leads us to say that Klesha is the cause for Sukha Dukkha. Now the question is, from where this Klesha came? Is this Klesha in the Panchabhutas? Is this Klesha in the mere Tanmatras? Just because I am hearing sound, is it coming with Klesha? If that is so, I cannot get rid of that, isn't it? So please note, anything that is a Swabhava cannot be eliminated. So we have to examine each one of these things and their Swabhava. If you look at this Swabhava and juxtapose this with the statement that Ishvara is free from Klesha, Ishvara is as much engaged with the Prapancha as I am. In fact, Ishvara is engaged with Prapancha much more than what I am. Because for me, there are certain limitations. I have physical limitations, intellectual limitations. That is why I am an Alpajna. Whereas Ishvara has been defined as Sarvajna. So because he is Sarvajna, his engagement with the world is far excess in proportion. But how did this Ishvara does not have any Klesha? For that, the answer is Ishvara is free from Trigunas. So he is also called Trigunatitaha. What about the Jiva? The Jiva is now under the dominance of Trigunas. Prapancha plus Triguna Drishyam. Jiva plus Trigunas is the individual. Trigunas do not bother Ishvara. So he is Purusha Vishesha. If somehow the Trigunas do not bother the Jiva, then the jiva also will be free. But by themselves, the trigunas do not have sukha dukkha. Look at that. To make the plot thicker. Is there sukha dukkha in sattva guna? Sattva guna's nature is just to reveal, that is all. Is there any problem in rajoguna? Rajoguna is just to enable interactions, transactions. So there is, look, the problem before Patanjali. He is searching, where is this thing called Ragadvesha? Where is that? If you know where the enemy is, you can find it. But a Padma Vyuha has been created. And we Abhinamanyus have entered into this Padma Vyuha, but we cannot come out. Because we never learned the method of coming out of this Padma Vyuha. So therefore, we have got to concern ourselves as to how to come out of this Padma Vyuha. And hence, such elaborate discussion is taken up by Patanjali Maharshi about Drishya and Drashta. So here, having established this is the nature of the Drishya, the text turns towards Drashta, the seer. So let us look at the qualifications, characteristics, and the use of the Drashta. Because it's only when we also understand Drashta, after having understood Drishyam, now we can search for the means for getting rid of the fundamental difficulty that makes us limited, which is avidya. So, Sutra number 20 picks up this question. Drashta drishimatraha shuddhopi pratyayānupashyaha. So literal meaning, drashta is the seer. This seer is drishimatraha. He only has the power to see. That is all. Pure observer. Pure consciousness. Shuddha is also absolutely pure, uncontaminated. The text adds api, even though, even if he is pure consciousness and he is pure. Pratyaya anupushyaha. Anupashya means he sees, he observes. Why? He is a seer, so he has to see. What does he see? Pratyayaha. He sees images. Prati, ya. Ya means knowledge, prati means every. He continuously sees image after image after image that is being presented before him. And this was simplified, much more simplified by Adi Shankara in his Dakshinamurti Stotra when he said, Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari, Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari, Tulyam Nijantargatam. Just as the reflection of a whole city is made on a mirror, just like that somebody is seeing the image in a mirror. The entire French Riviera is painted. It is painted and you hang it on your wall. And then you say, this is the French Riviera. But the French Riviera is in all respects much more huge, but that is how it is presented to you. So, pratyayānupashyaha. We see that, we post on Facebook. So we have got all these photo applications which every day come up. 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this is how you looked. then immediately what we do, oh my God, I should post this. Then you post a picture of yourself or your children, and then now you have before you a collage of your own pictures for the last 30 years, 40 years, 20 years, last year. Are the images same? All the images are different. But what do we say? This is me when I was 20 years. This is me when I was 30 years. So the drashta, even though the drishya is continuously changing, the drashta is looking at the images presented to him constantly. Looking at this image, the drashta in conjunction with this image, the image itself has got some falsehood in the sense that today I do not look as how I looked when I was 10 years old. But what does this drishta do? This is me, he says. This perception, this picture is mine, is the avidya, because when I say this is mine, you are owning some pratyaya, a particular image that is not true at this moment. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gives a beautiful story about it appears there was this rich man who had a puppy, and he immensely loved that puppy. But there were 3 rooms to which the puppy was not allowed to go. One was the kitchen, and the second was the puja room, and the third one was the living room. So the puppy was constantly thinking, okay, kitchen, I don't have to go because food will come to me. Because who is the boss in the house? Food will come to me. I don't have to go to the kitchen. Puja room, I don't care about puja. But why is it this person is not allowing me to go to the living room? It was not able to understand. One day, our hero had to go out of town. Every time he went out, he made sure that the living room was locked, so this dog does not stray into that living room. But on that day, because he was in a hurry, he leaves the door open. And our dog entered into this, and then it found 4 dogs there. Immediately it started barking and shouting and scratching. And completely the whole place was reduced into a mess. What was there in the living room? There were 4 mirrors on the 4 walls. The dog was looking at its own reflection. So when the drashta, because of the pratyaya, the image presented to it, that pratyaya is the one, even though the drashta is of the nature of pure cognizing power, thinks that it is in bondage. That is the problem. Now the question is, what is the limitation of this drashta? This drashta or the seer has to contact with the outside world only through the indriyas, isn't it? It has no direct contact. The prapancha is there. Our sense organs are there. The sense organs must receive the information, send it to the mind, send it to the buddhi. And the buddhi is the one that presents the scene to the drashta. Now, what is the problem with the buddhi? This buddhi is ever changing. Buddhi continuously changes, even though it is inert. Buddhi is jada. But why does the buddhi change? The buddhi changes because of trigunas. The world is constantly presented in the prism of the trigunas. And therefore, what does this buddhi do? This buddhi is the only medium of contact for the Purusha. And the buddhi exists for the sake of Purusha, and therefore, even though the Purusha exists for his own sake, the Drashta has to see the world in the mirror of the buddhi. Vishwam darpana drishyamana nagari tulyam. Therefore, the images that the Purusha gets is distorted by the Trigunatmika buddhi. See how the scripture is now homing in as to where the problem is. Because the Purusha is in association with buddhi, buddhi appears to have assumed the characteristics of Purusha. It appears, please note. What is the characteristic of Purusha? Consciousness, awareness, pure awareness. But what does this buddhi do? Because of its association with the Purusha, buddhi appropriates this ability of Purusha and says, I am a sentient entity. Whereas it is not. And for the Purusha, at any given moment of time, whatever the buddhi presents is what Purusha perceives, but at the moment of perception of what Purusha has got, it takes the power, buddhi takes the power of consciousness. Just like an iron piece takes the power of the magnet. Because of the proximity, then what it does is, it actually borrows the sentiency of the Purusha, assumes that it is the self Purusha, and it says that I have got Sukha Dukkha Raga Dvesha. And also it experiences Abhinivesha. So where did this Sukha Dukkha Raga Dvesha Abhinivesha come from? It came from the changing Trigunas, that is all. See, look at the intricate dynamic. Buddhi is inert, but it is experiencing Sukha Dukkha only when it is in association with Purusha. And the Purusha is presented with a drishya by the buddhi, and then it is also presenting it with the trigunas, and therefore the Purusha thinks that I am sorrowful, I have got avidya, I have got all these problems. Trigunatmika buddhi is the cause. Remove Trigunatmika from the buddhi, then the buddhi will simply present things as they are to the Purusha and no Sukha Dukkha. And unfortunately, buddhi is in tremendous domination of Trigunas, and therefore the Yoga Shastra is saying it is only when buddhi is trained to use the sentiency of Purusha not to experience or recognize Sukha Dukkha, but to overcome Sukha Dukkha, this avidya by knowledge. And hence, what are we going to train? What we have to train is now the buddhi, and to be able to separate the buddhi from the Trigunatmika prapancha. So for that we have got two options. One option is, should we engage with the world or should we disengage with the world? Since we cannot disengage with the world because of our present situation, we have got to somehow engage with the world differently. So how do I do that? This is where yoga comes. Now one more question has to be answered. That question is raised and answered in the next sutra. Tadartha eva drishyasya atma. Sutra number 21. Why is there drishya? So much confusing ideas, but we have got to sort out this enormous amount of confusion. Because sentiency is mixed up with inert, because of this mixture, this samyoga, the sentient part in us gets confused and gets disturbed. So somehow we have got to ask, why this sentient part of me, the Purusha in me, is behaving as though it has got Sukha Dukkha, as though it has got avidya? It is because buddhi is appropriating my sentiency, and it is combining that sentiency of the buddhi with the Trigunatmika prapancha, and somehow I am looking at the Purusha in the glass of the buddhi. And therefore we have got to now go to the fundamental question. Patanjali raises the fundamental question, why is there this drishyam in the first place? Is it not the problem because the drishya is there, everything is started? Suppose the world was not there. Suppose I was not there, the body, the conglomeration of Stula, Sukshma, Karana, Sharira was not there. My buddhi was not there. Nothing was not there. There would have been no problem. Only sentiency would be left, isn't it? Because drishya prapancha is not there. Now you know where we are going. That means I don't want to take rebirth. Because taking rebirth is assuming the three bodies. Taking rebirth means getting a buddhi. Taking rebirth means being in the prapancha. Taking rebirth means presenting this drishya prapancha to the Purusha in a distorted mirror. That's one goal. Another goal is, let us ask what is the purpose of this drishya. Is this an error caused in creation? Is it an error that the creation itself has been created? For that Patanjali questions, why is there a drishya? And then it says, tadartha eva drishyasya atma. Drishyasya atma means the essential quality of drishya. What is the essential quality of drishya? It is not for its own sake. Another very profound statement. So let us parse that question. Is the world there for its own sake or for somebody else's sake? To that extent, that question has been answered by saying that the world is there for bhoga apavargartham. In the previous sutra, they said it is for the sake of the jiva enjoying the world or for the sake of using the world as a platform to get liberated. So, that means either for bondage or for liberation, if there was no prapancha, the question would be moot. So therefore the drishya and its essential nature is not for its own sake, but tadartha. Tat means Purusha here, for the sake of Purusha. This is a very important point that he makes, that the drishya prapancha exists for the seer. But here the buddhi comes into play, and what this buddhi does is, that is what makes an improper engagement of the world, and the Purusha has to perceive whatever is perceived, whatever is presented by the buddhi. Hence, in Yoga Shastra, we don't have to do anything for the world. World need not be changed. It can be as it is.
Can I ask a question there, Ashwin?
Sure.
From a Yoga Shastra's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
when it says the world is for the purpose of Purusha, Yoga Shastra actually believes in multiple Purushas.
Correct.
Multiplicity of Purusha. So
Yes.
how does it reconcile the fact that there are many Purushas and there's one world?
Next sutra. Next sutra answers that question.
Okay. Good.
So therefore, we have, if we treat the individual Purushas, individual buddhi, and train that buddhi to present the world without the influence of trigunas. We know the famous story of Ashtavakra. See, Ashtavakra comes with his very distorted and very ugly body, but of extraordinary brilliance. He comes to the asthana of Janaka. The moment he comes into Janaka's court, all the courtiers will, as soon as they saw him, they laugh in mocking of how ugly he is. See, this is how slapstick humor is created even in movies, isn't it? If you look at slapstick humor, either on screen or on the stage, it is human distortions that evoke a lot of laughter. What is Tom and Jerry cartoon? What is Pink Panther cartoons? All of them are same, isn't it? We laugh at the disability of somebody on the stage. Same thing all these learned people do. And then Ashtavakra displays his great mind. So the buddhi is the one which creates all these distortions to entertain the Purusha, which it need not. And so we get into all kinds of these problems. So by yoga, when the individual buddhi is liberated from the trigunatmika buddhi, then the individual Purusha gets a liberation, and therefore the next sutra says kritartham prati nashtam api anashtam tat anya sadharanatvat. That's the response Yoga Shastra gives to your question, Hari. Very next sutra. Kritartham prati. Krita artham prati. For this individual Purusha, for whom the buddhi has matured, nashtamapi, What is nashtam here? The drishya is nashtam, or the distortions of the drishya is nashtam, is destroyed for the krita artham prati, for that particular purusha. But the universal triguna does not, there is no nasha for that, because akritartha purusha, tat anya, tat anya. What is tat anya? Akritartha. Kritartha is the one who has liberated. Anya is one who is not liberated. For those purushas, for those purushas who are not liberated, anya asadharanatvat, for them this prapancha has not gone. So, Hari, your question is directly answered there, because there is the individual Purusha, individual Buddhi, separate Purusha for separate Buddhi, even though Drishya Nasha takes place for one, it does not happen to everybody.
I think that answers one part of that, but I'm still in the other interpretation of saying, when we say the prapancha is for the tadartham, when he says tadartham, when that tad itself becomes multiple, it is a little complex scenario. So whose artham is it doing, right?
To the multiple Purushas, the one world exists.
Right.
Just like one movie is screened for 200 people in the audience.
Correct, yeah.
They show only one movie only once, right? For all the 200 people. But each one of the 200 people will understand the movie differently.
Yeah.
We were in, we just watched yesterday Kashmir Files. And everybody who watched the Kashmir Files had their own interpretation. So for some of us, for whom for me, for example, I have not even seen Kashmir. But I know to some extent what they suffered. Because when I was back in Bangalore in the LIC, right opposite our divisional office building, there is a shopping complex. Those of you who are familiar with Bangalore, there is a place called Unity Buildings. This Unity Buildings has a Kashmir Emporium. Around 71, 72, a Kashmiri Pandit family, 2 sons, their family, grandchildren, and the father and mother, they all left whatever they had in Kashmir and came. The grandfather was professor of Sanskrit. He was a very learned person. That is how we became very good friends, because it is from him I got to know a lot about the Sanskrit works of Kashmir. Abhinav Gupta and others, he was the one who introduced to me. Upagupta. And then his one son was professor of mathematics, another son was professor of physics. They just had to leave everything and come, and they set up a shop of the artwork of Kashmir. Even now, that store is there. So for me, it was a little more relevant, because I saw these eminent people coming. Instead of teaching, they were actually merchants. To whom do they share their knowledge with? What do they do? But there are some some of us who have never seen the Holocaust, some of us who have never seen what happened to Kashmir, then it is only an entertaining historical movie. At the most, we may feel sad for some of them who were shot point blank. But suppose it was somebody who was actually in the midst of things. For that Purusha who is witnessing all these things, the world presents differently. The world presents differently to me, the same event. Me, the another distinct Purusha, this Purusha looks at that world differently. Another Purusha looks at differently. Another Purusha will actually, if he was a Muslim who is watching the movie, will say that all this is fake. So Kritartham, to whom, for whose sake the Prapancha is there? The Prapancha is for the sake of the Purusha, even though multiple Purushas are there, but the Purusha who is perceiving the Prapancha is at the mercy of the Buddhi with Trigunas, because Buddhi has been given a very special privilege. Because of its proximity with the Purusha, it assumes the sentiency of the Purusha. So that is where we home in on the problem.
That example that you just gave, whose view is distorted? Is it the person who is actually experiencing it, or you, who is the outsider looking in?
It can be all of us, isn't it? Because our buddhi, because of the Triguna combination of my personality, see, because in the beginning itself I said that not only the Prapancha is mixed with Trigunas, each individual is coming with a different mixture of Trigunas. So my own composition of Trigunas is responsible for my buddhi distorting the image. And therefore yoga practice is prescribed to everybody. The outcome of the yoga practice is of different quality for different Purushas. I may need to do yoga abhyasa for 30 years, but whereas another person may get this purity of buddhi in 1 year. That, as a teacher, you are also aware. For the 20 students, you teach the same thing. That 1 hour you don't make any distinction. There is no particular Purusha to whom your teaching is addressed. But why some absorb better, why some don't? Because of their individual Triguna structure.
We also, in many cases, we look at what we call just biased information processing.
Yeah.
Because information is the same that's presented to everybody. What you see is what you want to see and what your mind trains you to see. And so, and then it goes off into a pretty significant discussion on, but what it means is there is no reality at this point. Everything is perception only. And then there is absolutist argument that says, no, there is a reality, but what we're talking about is what you see in that reality.
Exactly. You see, this sutra also has to be studied in conjunction with the earlier sutra which says, Sarvameva Dukkham Vivekinaha. Why Sarvameva Dukkham Vivekinaha? It is because there is this constantly changing Trigunas, and constantly changing the world, and constantly changing buddhi. So too many things are thrown in the mix. We don't know what is going to be the outcome.
Ashwath Garu, I just have one question. So in the example you gave us, so how will an enlightened person look at it? He is also going to have a view about the Kashmir thing, right? So how will he look at it? Won't that be another Purushas then?
No, he will only ask of himself, if I were there, what I could have done. And that is also a moot point because I am not there. But then now a really enlightened person will start thinking, what can I do? Now, because if the enlightened person wants to be engaged with the world, see again, that is why I said two options are there. You can be engaged with the world or you can disengage with the world. If you disengage with the world, then in that case you are exercising vairagya, you are exercising kaivalya. The question of you are having any view itself is useless because you are not going to do anything about it. Whereas if you are going to be engaged in the world, then a viveki will have to think about lokasangraha.
So basically he's not going to give a judgment looking at it. He's just going to see what he can do to help.
Exactly. What can I do? What should I do? Because there always there are gray areas.
Yes.
And the buddhi is unable to give you accurate information because the buddhi is also conditioned by trigunas. That's why later on, of course, like Ramananda Saraswati and others who were interpreting these sutras, they actually question if does the prapancha even exist. Coming from the Gaudapada school and then all that. But then that's a little far-fetched because Yoga Shastra does not reject the existence of prapancha. If it did, then that sutra is redundant. That drishya is for the sake of the seer.
And I was going to connect it back to what he said before, between Bhoga Vargartham and here talking about Tadartham. So whether that is for Bhoga or Abhavarga is going to be, it's the same, or does the Prapancha have a say in it, right? It's up to the individual to interpret versus what the Prapancha have a say in. To a little bit to what Rahul is saying, the perception could be different, but what is presented, is that for Bhoga or for Abhavarga?
Bhoga or Apavarga, for both reasons the Prapancha is there. And both Bhoga and Apavarga are for the Purusha. Who the determinant of whether the Prapancha is going to be used for Bhoga or Apavarga is in the hands of Buddhi. This is the reason why Krishna also says, Buddhahu Sharanam Anvichha. The only entity to whom we have to use, is Buddhi. Because Deha is useless, Prapancha is useless, Manas is useless because it's purely an emotion. Buddhi, because of its close proximity to Purusha and its ability to draw the sentiency from Purusha, therefore Buddhi is the locus for Sukha or Dukkha, Vidya or Avidya. Asmita can be easily encouraged by Buddhi, Asmita can be destroyed by Buddhi also. So you can see in the structure of the Yoga Shastra, what he's doing is he dealt with Abhinivesha, said that okay, everybody has to die, there's nothing you can do. Ragadvesha is very palpable. Everybody experiences what is Ragadvesha. Now what he's actually doing in these 4 sutras is he's dealing with Asmita. And he's pinning this concept of Asmita on the Buddhi colored by Trigunas. Then he will say, now let us deal with Avidya. So the enemy can be attacked or enemies can be isolated. The ultimate enemy for the Purusha, for getting Kaivalya is avidya. So here the technique that Yoga Shastra is using is making avidya isolated from all this. War strategy. We'll see more.
But in general, Yoga Sutra gives very strong arguments. This one sutra is where I felt it is a little bit weaker in the argument, saying that Anya Sadharanatvat was almost like, it didn't have a very strong argument, but say, hey, it is how it is seen, and so therefore we will accept it. There's a little bit of a reconciliation issue there.
We will also let's go deeper into the 22nd sutra in our next class and see that kritartham prati nashtam api anashtam tat anya sadharanatvat. So that has got to be carefully examined, and then so we'll do that in our next class.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very tough section because so much metaphysics is there. But that's the nature of the text. And that's why in the first iteration, you might have noticed, first time when we studied, I just skipped through all this and then did not even touch this, and then jumped from definition of kleshas to Ashtanga Yoga. Of course, Sapta Pranta, the 7 steps I touched, that was just merely touched, that's all. But this time, we will really try to parse this.
Ashwath Garu, just one quick question. So when we say that the world is an illusion, is it because everybody has their own perceptions? In that way, can we explain that the world is an illusion?
Yes, it is. It is actually Maya. In the way in which, if you say the world is there, the world is there. If you say the world is not there, the world is not there. But in reality, is the world there or not there? See, that is
physically you cannot deny it, right?
We cannot deny its existence. We cannot deny its non-existence. This is what you remember we studied in Vivek Chudamani. Sannapya sannapi ubhayatmiko na. It appears to be there. Is it really there? If it was really there, then when you were in deep sleep, where did it go? If it is really not there, how is it you are able to see it now in wakeful state? So in absolute terms, you cannot say it is there, you cannot say it is not there. So the only conclusion we can say is anirvachaniya. We cannot parse it. Another thing is, should we even parse it? See, that's another basic question. Should we even resolve the question whether the world is real or not? We don't have to. Because if I do manonasha, which is again another whole different project, if I am able to completely resolve my mind to the extent of my mind, the world is not there. That is all. And if I am happy with that, wonderful.
And we also learned that it should be there for us to interact and evolve and everything.
Yeah. And moreover, in Gita also we have raised this question and we have discussed this. What is the role for a Sthita Prajna? What is the role for a Jivan Mukta? Once you are liberated and the liberated person is still alive, what should that person do? We have to create a project for. So therefore that is of immediate relevance to us also, because we are in the path of liberating ourselves, and one day our prayer is that we will be Jivan Muktas. Then we must also have a clear idea of what will be my life after liberation. And therefore prapancha is required. This is where Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya differed from the Shuddha Advaita of Gaudapada. In fact, even Shankara had to slightly modify. World is necessary. Because suppose you want to guide somebody, let us say all your study of Yoga Shastra, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishad has given some maturity, and you see that your children, your grandchildren need a little bit of help. You must be there to give that. You must be there to give it either by direct instruction or by conduct. Sometimes you cannot do direct instruction. By just one's behavior, it can be done. I was just giving a Subhashita in our earlier Veda class. The lotus has to blossom. For the lotus to blossom, sun has to rise, that's all. Nothing else. For the lily to blossom in the night, moon has to rise. So we can be the sun, we can be the moon. A Jivan Mukta is like that. The very presence of the Jivan Mukta actually will become the role model of those who can change. Sanjayat can change, listening to Bhagavad Gita. Then Arjuna can change listening to Bhagavad Gita. We can change listening to Bhagavad Gita. So that is why in the last class I was saying, samsprutya. What do I remember? What do I remember? And that memory, chitta and chitta vritti is located in buddhi, isn't it? So that is why you will see the subtext of these sutras is buddhi. If we somehow train buddhi to present the world to Purusha without the influence of trigunas, the person, that Purusha is kritartha. As I said, this is the core metaphysical part of Yoga Shastra. Because next what happens? He gives you Ashtanga Yoga, the practice methodology will give you, dhyana methodology will give, then he will talk about the siddhis, etc. So this is the tough part for us to truly contemplate.
It becomes challenging, Ashtkar, because you get this doubt sometimes. Am I being indifferent or am I being emotionally neutral? And it's just a tussle most of the time because you don't want apathy. You
Correct.
Want to be engaged.
Yes.
And so it's a very interesting dilemma you go through. As I don't want it to be indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be engaged. Yeah. So it's good practice.
It is. That's why I always when I'm talking about Gita, I connect it to Yoga Sutra. When I speak about Yoga Sutra, I connect it to Gita, because Gita Acharya gives Loka Sangraha Mevartham Karyam Karma Samachara. So we have to do something. Then I am interested in the world. I cannot be disinterested in the world. And therefore let me engage. Will I be of any use to the world? Then I will get the feedback back from the world. Because if the world accepts my service, then that means I have been useful. If the world rejects my service, then that means I have to go back to the drawing board. And that's where Yoga Shastra helps us by saying, okay, this buddhi is presenting to Purusha some distortion. And as the person's position in society becomes higher and higher, this challenge becomes also higher and higher. Just imagine if you were the President of the United States. What would you do? Whose side will you take? What kind of an engagement you can do with China? What kind of an engagement you can do with Russia? What will you do with Ukraine? And how will you deal with the citizens who are pretty much divided and who really don't know what is happening on the ground? How many people really know what is going on? So therefore, somehow with yoga, if the buddhi can somehow be trained for least influence of triguna, again it will be too ambitious to say, I will develop a buddhi which has no guna at all. Though Krishna says, Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna, it's not a simple project. But it is not depressing either, saying that, well, I cannot make any progress, because whatever little progress that can be done, Swalpamapyasya dharmasya, and whatever little you can do, to that extent there is progress. Whatever little, if in trivial things we don't get agitated, some small trivial things will be there. Something, you'll get a flat tire. Okay, that's all, it will fix it. So if we train in those small, minor things, then slowly we will get used to take bigger challenges also. And avenues will become visible. What else I can do? Different avenues will become visible. Otherwise, we get stuck in that groove of the immediate. That's what Patanjali Maharshi's effort here in, sort it out, find out. We are trying to chase a phantom. Where is this Sukha Dukkha? Because if I can find where it is, then I can do something about it. But I'm experiencing it. Thank you.